Thanks for joining us again on What Matters This Week. I'm Lauren Maloney. Here with me is Geoff Zochodne. He is an industry analyst and sports betting journalist for Covers.com. Geoff, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
We're going to talk about all things sports betting after Vermont's governor signed the bill on Wednesday of this week. I anticipate you teaching me a few things here today because usually I just, yell and scream at the TV when it comes to watching NFL games. So let's start with this. What's preventing anyone right now in Vermont from going online and placing a bet?
There's not much really, and that was one of the driving forces behind the passage of this legislation was a realization that there is a substantial amount of so-called gray market wagering that's going on in the state where somebody may be wagering using a site that's regulated perhaps abroad, offshore, that kind of place, but it's not regulated in the state itself. And so that was one of the factors that went into this legislative push.
Vermont now the 38th state to legalize sports betting. A lot of our neighboring states already have, Massachusetts and New Hampshire, for example. What did Vermont take away or learn from what other states have already implemented?
Quite a bit, actually. Vermont had the benefit of being a slower mover in this regard and looking at states that have done this already, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and trying to figure out what would work best for the state itself. And you saw, through the fall, there was a committee that spent time just studying sports betting and trying to put together a recommendation for what it thought would be the ideal kind of sports betting for Vermont. And they looked, the model that was ultimately settled upon looks a lot like what you see in New Hampshire, which of course nearby, as well as New York, which, obviously there's substantial difference there in population. But that was, they went through this process where they did look at what other states have done, and they ultimately settled on a model, first of all, that embraces an online only version of sports betting for now, at least, which is kind of based on the reality of having a spread out population where there's not, and there's also no real like pre-existing gambling infrastructure like off-track betting facilities and casinos that people could set up a retail sports book in. And so that went into it, as well as the idea of having this competitive bidding process, which you saw in New Hampshire and in New York, and incorporating that into Vermont's model.
How will Vermont's law be different, let's say, from New York or New Hampshire?
I, it'll be a bit different in that, in New Hampshire they ultimately settled on one operator. It's DraftKings, so it's a sole business that has kind of legal monopoly on the sports betting market there. New York has 7 or 8 operators, I believe. So it's not going to be totally different, but it'll be sized more appropriately for Vermont itself. So like the model that's been proposed is ideally having 2 to 6 operators. So
Right.
a little bit more than New Hampshire, perhaps a few fewer than New York, but still kind of abiding by that competitive bidding process that you saw in those states.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Vermont will set money aside to create a program to help those people with gambling problems. But I've read that some people are getting enticed by promotions of free money or insured bets, that sort of thing. How will Vermont, or can the state, kind of police that?
There are some restrictions in the legislation for the types of promotions that can be offered in Vermont. One that is in the bill that we've seen that other states have been adopting is a prohibition on the term risk-free in an offer. That's a term that's really fallen out of favor because there's concerns that it's perhaps misleading if you call it risk-free, and yet you have bettors that are still being required to wager some of their own money. There's actually some risk involved. It's not necessarily risk-free. So that's one thing that Vermont has gone and made sure just will not be permitted in the state whatsoever. That's in the bill, so it's just totally off the table. So you have the regulator that's going to be able to review the advertising plans and to scrutinize them and to say to regulated entities. Hey, we like this, we don't like this, we want you to change this, we don't want you to change this, that sort of thing. And that's an ability you didn't previously have when you don't have a regulated market, because there's no incentive for an unregulated operator to come forward to state authorities and discuss advertising plans, for instance.
Are there states that do a better job when it comes to limiting gambling problems or addiction that you've seen in your reporting?
Um, it's a hard thing to nail down just because it's still a really nascent industry. If you think about it, you look at how far things have come in pretty short order. It was only in 2018 that you had the Supreme
Yeah.
Court decision that has freed up all the states to legalize sports betting, or all the states outside Nevada essentially to legalize sports betting. And so that data is still being compiled. What we have seen, though, in states that have recently legalized sports betting is you see, an uptick in the number of calls to problem gambling helplines, for instance. And that is something that, part of that might be people who are seeking help in growing numbers. The other part of it, too, is these are being required by regulators to be advertised to customers, to let them know that, if they think that they need some help, that there are resources out there, and alerting people to these resources so they can access them, and accessing them when they previously hadn't been. So it's hard to say which states are doing it best. You look at a state like New Jersey, which is a really mature gaming state, if you would like to call it that, that's had casino gambling for a long time, which was one of the first to legalize sports betting because it was part of the lawsuit that ultimately wound up, creating the environment for that expansion. And they're doing some really unique things. Like you're seeing these more mature states look at their current infrastructure, their current regulations and law, and see if there is room for tweaking. And one thing we have seen really over the past year is a hard look again at the type of advertising that operators are allowed to do. And as I spoke about earlier, it's that risk-free term that's really come in for a lot of scrutiny.
You mentioned when the Supreme Court cleared the way for all 50 states to offer this. Actually, Americans have bet over 220 billion on sports with legal gambling outlets since the Supreme Court signed off on this. Are there still, Geoff, some concerns over how it can be regulated since, we're 5 years into this? Are there wait and see benchmarks that Vermont will look for?
I think so, because there are provisions in the legislation that require, reporting about the type of consumer behavior you're seeing from players, and so that will inform regulators and then potentially lawmakers going forward if there are changes that need to be made. And as you pointed out earlier, there's funding that's set aside to create this new problem gambling program, which is something that the state doesn't have, and that it'll be set up. And I assume there'll be resources and data collection that'll go on that, again, will inform the decision makers to decide if there are tweaks that need to be made. So there definitely are going to be some opportunities to reflect on where things are going and if things need to be changed.
You may not know the answer to this, but is basically localized betting on some collegiate sports team, is that off the table in Vermont?
Yeah, it's so the bill sets out that you have a wide variety of things you can wager on: professional, college, amateur sports. The types of wagering is going to be very widespread. Single bets, parlays, props, teasers, all that sort of stuff. But one restriction that was put in there is that games in which a Vermont college is playing is going to be off the table for sports bettors unless they're playing in a tournament like March Madness. And so the thinking there is, when you have these bigger events, there are so many more eyeballs on them that you're able to ensure there's just so much more scrutiny of the games as they're being played. And so the thinking there is it's harder for any kind of funny business to go on. So there is that restriction just on regular season games. When it comes to March Madness, like say the Catamounts get into the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, that's something you'd still be able to bet on. It's just you can't wager on them in their regular season games until they get into that tournament situation.
Okay, that's very important. Appreciate that. We know Vermont is a small state. How do you think it will stack up in terms of collecting revenue here? Will it take a while to see a reward, for lack of a better word?
I think that there will be an upfront benefit. There is a requirement for operators to pay basically a $500,000 operator fee up front for the privilege of operating in Vermont. So there will be that upfront money that the state can collect. Some of that's going to go toward paying the costs that are going to be incurred to set up the legal sports betting framework in the first place. But there will be some funding there at least. And then it becomes a question of how much revenue is the state going to see from the actual wagering itself. And so that is something that's going to be hammered out with the operators in that competitive bidding process and settle on which percentage the state's going to get. And what the bill says is that, at the very least, it's going to be 20% of the revenue that they manage to generate in the state. And so what the legislative fiscal office did is they kind of looked at that and they gave a few different scenarios. So say you get the bare minimum of 20% revenue share with an operator, that puts you somewhere around, I think it was $1 million and a bit in revenue perhaps in the first year from wagering. If it's up to 50%, it's four times that potentially. So it really depends on where that revenue share lands. And that'll drive a lot of the future projections, and maybe that'll help inform and give people a better idea of where exactly the revenue will be. But again, you do get that upfront jolt of revenue just from the licensing fees.
Okay. Since this is your job and you do this inside and out, what in particular will you be looking forward to as Vermont goes throughout this process? As we understand, it could be ready by the end of 2023, definitely in time for the NFL playoffs. But what in particular are you looking for when it comes to getting this off the ground?
I mean, the big thing for me, initially at least, is going to be the revenue share percentage that the state and the operators agree to. Because what we've seen in New York when they launched online sports betting is you had operators agree to pay a 51% split of the revenue to the state, which for New York has been very, very good. It's translated into hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, essentially. So it's been a very, very fortuitous thing for them. But on the operator side, they have been not able to turn a profit in the state because of the high revenue or the high revenue share. And so they have actually spoken up about how the tax rate there is something that they would like to see change. And while the state hasn't done that yet, that's been a recurring theme with the operators. So it'll be interesting to me to see where they land on the number in Vermont, just knowing that's gone on, and see what they see as suitable or doable, I guess, even in Vermont.
Okay. Geoff, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.